You expect too much. And that's exactly why you keep losing. Not because you're weak, not because you're not enough, but because something in the way you show up around other people is telling them something you never meant to say. And most women never figure that out. You know the feeling. You send a message, you wait for a reply, you check your phone once, twice. You start running through scenarios. Maybe he's busy, maybe he didn't see it, maybe you worded something wrong. You start typing again, delete it, rewrite it, and you wait some more. Or maybe it looks different for you. Maybe you over-explain. You justify your choices. You need him to understand where you're coming from, why you reacted that way, why you need what you need, why it matters to you. You talk, you explain, you repeat yourself, and somewhere inside you're hoping he'll finally get it. He doesn't get it. And the more you explain, the less he sees. There's a reason for that, but it's not the reason you think. Most people assume the problem is communication. They think if they just express themselves better, if they find the right words, the other person will understand and things will shift. That's what we've been taught. Speak up, be open, be honest. But what nobody tells you is that the way you talk communicates something far more powerful than your words ever could. What people actually pick up on isn't what you say, it's the state you're in when you say it. And when you're waiting, when you're over-explaining, when you're trying to convince someone, when you need the other person to validate what you're feeling, the state you're projecting is that of someone who needs permission to exist. And that changes everything. It's not conscious. It's not cruel. Nobody sits there thinking, she needs my approval, so I'll respect her less. That's not how it works. It's deeper than that. It's instinctive. It's a perception that forms in seconds without anyone deciding to form it. But it forms, and once it's there, it shapes everything that follows. Carl Jung understood something that most people still haven't figured out. He understood that every human being projects a psychological energy, an inner presence, something that comes before words, beyond behavior, something that gets felt before you've even opened your mouth. He called it psychic integrity, the coherence between who you are on the inside and what you radiate on the outside. Jung spent decades studying how people build their psychological identity, and what he discovered was unsettling. Most people don't live from their real center. They live from their wounds, from their fears, from what the child they once were learned in order to survive in an environment that didn't always truly see them. And that child often learned one thing, that to be loved, you had to earn it, that to be kept, you had to make yourself necessary, that to avoid being abandoned, you never asked for too much, never take up too much space, never be.
You might still be carrying that belief without even knowing it. And it's that belief that makes you wait. It's that belief that makes you over-explain. It's that belief that makes you search over and over again for proof that you're good enough to be chosen. But there's a truth that Jung kept coming back to, an uncomfortable truth. He said that as long as you look outside for what you haven't found inside, you will stay dependent on the outside. And that dependency, it shows, it's felt, it's written in every message that ran too long, every silence that felt too heavy, every forgiveness given way too fast. And what he observed was this: the people who hold power in relationships, not power as in control, but power as in respect, attraction, presence, those people all have one thing in common. They don't wait. Not because they're playing games, not because they're pretending, but because they have something on the inside that doesn't need to be confirmed from the outside. Their value doesn't depend on someone else's gaze, and you can feel that. Now look at what happens when it's the opposite. When you're waiting on a text, you're no longer focused on yourself, you're focused on him. Your energy, your attention, your thoughts, all of it is pointed at someone else, at a response, at a validation. And something inside you contracts, shrinks, becomes dependent on an external event. People feel that. They don't always have the words for what they're sensing, but they pull back, Or they stick around just differently, with less care, less effort, because somewhere, unconsciously, they've picked up on the fact that you'll be there regardless, that you'll wait, that you'll explain, that you'll justify. And that's when something very subtle begins, something gradual, something you don't see coming. At first, it's small. He texts back a little slower, invests a little less, takes up a little more room. And you adjust. You become a little more patient, a little more understanding. You downplay what you feel to avoid creating tension. You keep your needs to yourself. You make space, more and more space. And do you know what happens when you keep making space for someone? They take all the space. Not because they're a bad person, not because they're consciously deciding to, but because it's a psychological law. The space you abandon, someone else fills, and the dynamic shifts, slowly, quietly, until the day you realize you're no longer at the center of your own relational life. You've become the one who adapts, the one who waits, the one who hopes. Jung talked about what he called the shadow, that part of us we refuse to look at, and often hidden in that shadow, there's a fear we won't name out loud. The fear of being too much. The fear of taking up too much space, of wanting too much, of being too demanding, too hard to love. So we shrink. We make ourselves smaller. We make everything easy for the other person. We become accommodating, understanding, available. And we lose something essential. We lose contact with our own center. That center Jung called the self. Not the ego, not the persona, that social mask we wear to be liked, but the deep self. That part of you that knows what she wants, that knows what she's worth, that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist fully. And the hidden law Jung revealed is this: the more connected you are to your own center, the more you naturally radiate a kind of power, not aggressive power, not controlling power, but the power of attraction, the power of respect, the power of presence.
That kind of power doesn't get explained, it gets felt. And now, the real question: how do you get back to that? It's not a technique, it's not a game, it's not a dating strategy. It's something far more fundamental. It's coming back to yourself. When you stop waiting, you're not pretending to be busy. You actually are busy because you're reinvesting your attention into your own life, into what lights you up, into what you're building, into what genuinely feeds you. When you stop over-explaining, you're not shutting down communication. You're just choosing not to beg for understanding. You know what you feel. You know what you want. And if someone can't see that, it's no longer your job to convince them. That's their problem to sort out. When you stop chasing validation, you don't become cold. You become solid. And there's a massive difference. Cold pushes people away. Solid pulls them in. Because people are unconsciously looking for someone who is grounded, someone who doesn't fall apart at the first sign of distance, someone who exists fully, with or without them. And that solidity doesn't fall from the sky. It's built, decision by decision, boundary by boundary. Every time you choose not to send the pointless message, every time you choose not to justify your worth, every time you choose to fill your own life instead of waiting for someone else to come fill it for you. That's real work. Not flashy, not visible from the outside, but deep. And its effects, they show clearly. And something shifts, something in the way people look at you. You walk into a room and there's something different about your presence. You're not scanning for approval. You're not watching for reactions. You're just there, whole, grounded, and people feel it. Conversations change, dynamics change. Men who used to treat you carelessly start putting in effort. Not because you followed a rule, not because you played a part, but because something real transformed inside you. You no longer need their validation to feel okay.
And paradoxically, that's the exact moment they start to truly see you. Jung had a quote that has stayed with me. He said that what you resist persists, and what you accept transforms. And what he meant by that in the context of relationships is this: as long as you resist the idea of being alone, as long as you're afraid of not being chosen, as long as you need someone to confirm your value, you stay trapped in that need. But when you accept it, when you look yourself in the face and say, yes, I've needed this. Yes, I waited too long. Yes, I looked in other people what I should have been finding in myself, and I can change that starting right now. That's when something actually transforms. Not in a day, not in a week, but gradually, deeply, permanently. You start talking to yourself differently. You start making decisions based on what you want, not what you think he expects. You start setting boundaries, not to punish anyone, but because you respect yourself. And that self-respect radiates outward. People feel it, and they treat you accordingly. That's real power. Not manipulation, not games, not strategy. Power that comes from the inside. The kind nobody can give you and nobody can take away. The kind that doesn't depend on a text, a look, or someone's approval. The power of not waiting anymore. The power of existing fully for yourself first. Because that's the truth Jung was trying to pass on. Someone else doesn't decide your value. Their reply doesn't determine whether you deserve love. Their attention doesn't prove that you matter. The only person who gets to decide any of that is you. And the day you actually internalize that, not just intellectually, not just on the surface, but in your gut, in your decisions, in the way you walk into a room, the way you speak, the way you look people in the eyes, that day, everything changes. The relationships you attract change. The quality of men who enter your life changes because you've changed what you project. You're no longer the woman who waits. You're the woman who moves forward. And that is not the same thing. That is not the same thing at all. If this video hit something in you, if you recognized yourself in what you just heard, drop the word power in the comments. Just that one word, because it means you understood something important today, something a lot of people are too afraid to look at. And subscribe, because this kind of truth, we all need to hear it more often.